Welcome to r/AskReddit, a place where you can ask Reddit thought-provoking questions. This post comes from Andrew is my dog. What's a name brand item you refuse to replace with generic? Crayola crayons. Generic taste funny. Post-its. All knockoffs don't stick. They are horrible. This is a list of post-apocalypse high-value trades. Lego. No rivals have comparable quality. Data storage. If I lose years of photographs, it will be because of my own negligence, not because I saved $8 on a SD card. Q-tip. I've tried others and they suck, then I'm stuck with like 2,000 shitty cotton swabs. Growing up black, well, I'm still black but also grew up black. I used to notice my white Asian friends' houses would smell so good on laundry day. My house never smelled like that. Come to find out, pretty much all my friends' family used Tide. At my house we used some cheap generic stuff. So somehow in my childlike brain I started to connect Tide with success. LOLIDK. It wasn't until my late 20s where I finally got a job where I can easily afford the way more expensive Tide brand, and to this day it's all I buy. Smells like nostalgia. Many people mentioned Hellmann's mayo. Heinz ketchup and beans, Kikkoman soy sauce. Here's one I haven't seen. Lee & Perrins Worcestershire sauce. Absolutely no substitute. I would love to find out who manufactures the napkins sold to places like Domino's, so that I could then order a nuclear strike on their factories. I don't understand the purpose of napkins that don't work as napkins. I get about 784 of them every time that I order pizza, and their only use is to soak up liquid. They don't work for wiping hands or any other surface. In a pinch you could probably use the edge of one as a blade. The next post comes from Plan Witherman 42. What companies can go fuck themselves? Fleshlight would make the most sense, I suppose. Ticketmaster. BlackRock and any other companies currently trying to buy as many single-family homes as possible so that they manipulate housing prices and raise rents while being poo landlords. Nestle, horrible practices. The worst thing is, if you want to boycott them, you need a fucking flowchart because they own so many food companies. FIFA, unbelievably corrupt, I don't even know where to start. Canadian chiming in, Bell Media. Liars and thieves. Once got an email Tuesday morning about how sad and difficult it is to lose co-workers, hundreds, due to layoffs. Got an email Wednesday morning touting how Q4 profits were through the roof as they congratulated executives. Edit, Bell Let's Talk is an absolute scam as well. John Deere. People tend to think of Apple as the biggest opponent to the right to repair movement. Nah. Apple's got nothing on John Deere. Any MLM company. Easier to ask which corporations should not go fuck themselves, that's a much shorter list. Edit, the short list so far includes Costco, Patagonia, Lego, Ben & Jerry's, H-E-B, and several others. American Health Insurance. Bank of America. Drained my savings with recurring overdraft protection fees, it only took a few days. I was a poor student and had to get through the summer. The fuckers actually ended up arguing with me and at one point tried negotiating a return of half of what had been taken. Out of hundreds of dollars. Told them flat out no. Then called and got a voice recording asking to leave a message. I told them I wanted my money back, and I was contacting my state and national representatives, the Better Business Bureau, and the local city newspaper. I was effing livid. Got a call a few days later from a very apologetic executive, so they claimed, and my money was returned. I allowed that one charge if the fee for the overdraft was correct, but they returned that too. So I transferred to a credit union immediately and closed my accounts. Never again. Effers actually tried to negotiate to return only half of the hundreds of dollars in overdraft fees they took unfairly. I had been with them for years at that point. Nestle. Because of what they do in Africa, and also the fact that they manipulate parents that can't or don't want to breastfeed, into using their terrible alternative. Pretty sure half of it is sugar. Oh, and the CEO said that water isn't a human right. Deutsche Bank. Shamelessly invest in pretty much every evil project or person they possibly can. The next post is from Lost Comparison 5110. What are the most disturbing facts you know about slavery? There are more than 40 million people living in slavery today. The thing that always sticks in my mind is the people that they made process sugar in the Caribbean. Apparently when the sugarcane slurry would get heated up, it would give them incredibly painful third-degree burns if it got on their skin, and it would stick to them and be impossible to get off. It was inevitable that the people working near it would get hit with hot lava sugar all day long all over whatever skin they had exposed, which was probably a lot because it was the Caribbean. Sounds like a punishment they would give someone in hell. Impregnating the slaves and then impregnating the daughters of that act. Slave owners used to take out insurance plans on their slaves in case they died or ran away. The funding for slave catchers who tracked down runaway slaves came in part from insurance payouts. The only company still around that I know of that sold slave insurance was New York Life, or whatever their name is. In the books it would have the slave's name, how much was paid for the insurance, and what the payout would be. That it was slave labor that built the stadiums for this year's World Cup. 40 to 45% of the slaves during the Atlantic slave trade went to Brazil. This was mostly because the slave masters treated them so poorly they wouldn't survive long enough to reproduce. Elsewhere in the world, a slave was considered an investment, but in Brazil, it was an expendable piece of equipment. The last country to abolish slavery was Mauritania in Africa, and they did this in 1981. In pretty much every case where slavery was abolished, the slave owners were compensated and not the enslaved. Compensation basically crushed Haiti. The UK went to the banks to borrow the money to compensate slave owners in 1835, and British taxpayers finished paying off the debt in 2015. William Ellison, a very intelligent African-American slave, worked for his master in SC at a cotton gin. I say worked for his master because, while he was a slave, he was able to make some profit. Even though his master took the majority of his profits. He finally makes enough to buy his freedom. First thing he does while free, buys land in SC and starts a cotton gin. After years of success, he slowly became one of the largest slave owners in SC. The reason I find it disturbing is because no one, including someone who was once a slave, thought what they were doing was wrong. They just thought it was good business. That a major invention of modern gynecology, the speculum, was invented by forcing enslaved women into experimentation. J. Marion Sims is still considered the father of modern gynecology, and he used enslaved women in much of his experimentation. The prevailing thought was that the enslaved women didn't feel pain or had deadened nerve endings, or the white dudes just didn't care, which is probably more likely. The horrendous surgeries and experiments done on these women was beyond awful. We often hear about the brutality, the torture, rape, murder, and other horrific abuses of enslaved people. While all of that certainly did happen, there was also the everyday abuse that seems milder but was persistent. Think about the worst job you ever had and how it felt to work there. Your boss was a dick, you constantly felt disrespected and couldn't wait for your shift to end to get home. If you were enslaved, there was no going home. That constant feeling of disrespect and despair was with you always. Even worse was knowing that your children would grow up to know the same life. Even the so-called kind masters contributed to it. A true example of the banality of evil. The worst incidents occurring to people kept as slaves are recorded. What wasn't recorded should be a lot worse. We have very little idea of what went on in those plantations. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed them, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for daily Reddit videos.